Welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Club. My name is Jessamy G. I am not joined today by my beautiful co-host, Miss Alice Edie. Regular listeners of the pod will know our beautiful Alice is taking a short break while she travels the world doing amazing things. But excitingly, in this little interim period, we've got some very exciting Alice Imposters that are going to join us. So very big welcome to our first Alice Imposter, the incredible Dr. Marion Piper. Welcome, Marion.
What's up? Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. So some of you may recognize Marion if you are a creative about town in Melbourne. I'm sure you have bumped into her at any possible creativity related conference, meetup, whatever. You might have seen her speaking either on stage or just next to you in the coffee line. She is an incredible writer, speaker, and creativity coach, and one of our earlier guests, interview guests on the Imposter Syndrome Club podcast. So it's so good to have you back.
Thanks for having me. And it's I'm like creative Jesus. I'm everywhere.
You sure are. You are a busy gal. If you want to find He's busy. If you want to find out a bit more about Marion and her history and story, I recommend going back and listening to that interview episode. But today it's going to be much more of a chit chat, and I wanted to reach out to you, particularly Marion, because, well, A, you're a deep friend of the pod and we love you, but B, I became aware actually last week. I sort of knew that this was something that you were trying out, but you made a post on Instagram last week celebrating 6 months of no drink and booze. Congratulations.
Oh my gosh, insanity. Did I ever think I would be that girl? No. And thank you. Yes, it's been a really interesting year, as I'm sure a lot of other people listening can relate to. I'm really, really loving what I've discovered so far. Can't wait to unravel that one for you today.
Yeah, let's dive in. It was so timely for me because it's something that's been on my mind for a few reasons. Firstly, this is our final couple of days over here in LA, and we head off on Sunday. So by the time this episode comes out, I will have just touched down back home in Melbourne. And while, a prevailing drinking culture is not limited to Australia, we do it super fucking well in Australia.
We sure do.
Yeah. And Dan and I were reflecting down on Venice Beach last weekend. There was like a vintage car show, which was so sick. But they had, like stalls and cars and music and fun stuff. I mean, there's something happening there every day in the summer. But we noticed, what is different about this? And it was that there was no alcohol, and we were reflecting on the fact that that wouldn't happen in Australia. You wouldn't have an event like that, particularly with that sort of crowd that's got live music and that's on the beach. Alcohol would have to be provided or people would be bringing their own. And it just is not a thing in the same way here. So we were thinking about gosh, it is so linked to every social thing that we do, everything that's framed as fun. There is always a bar. And so it can become so difficult to separate what is me having fun and what is alcohol, because the alcohol is just kind of always there, right? So it had been front of mind for that reason, but also, this has nothing to do with imposter syndrome, but certainly an element of impostering, in that I think many, if not most of us, are not honest with ourselves and others about how much we drink, whether that be frequency or volume. Particularly not to fucking doctors, right? Oh yes, I have 2 standard drinks a week. But more importantly, I don't think we're honest with ourselves and others about how we really feel about it.
And yeah. Yep. That resonates.
Right. So I've been thinking about this quite a lot, because in the 2 years preceding lockdown, I was such a smug little bitch because I'm like, I have solved my relationship with alcohol. And not that I've ever been an alcoholic. I would say from the people that I have spent time growing up with, like a pretty normal amount of drinker, which is still quite a bit as a young person in Australia.
Yep.
And again, just sort of like having it tied to all the fun things and to being a fun person and all this sort of stuff. But I did Feb fast, and then I'd had a few like failed attempts at doing like a month challenge thing previously. But for whatever reason, I think I was sort of right into gym stuff. Maybe I'd started running. I don't know. But for whatever reason, at the end of the month, I was like, I actually don't feel like going back.
Yeah.
Which was like, holy shit, like a totally new thing for me. So I ended up extending it to 2 months. And then what I did for the next 2 years was to have a month on and a month off, which was so effective for me because what I found was in the month on, I wasn't dying for a drink. Like if there was a wedding or a thing on, I'd have a drink, but it wasn't like, oh, it's Friday, we get pissed. Right? And then there was a fucking global pandemic. And I was like, all that out the window. Give me all the wine, all the Tim Tams. Baby needs her bottle.
Yeah. Game on, moles. Let's go.
Right? And then that has I've tried to reinstate the month on month off thing, but it hasn't stuck in the same way, or I've done it successfully, but I haven't felt the same about it. So there's a deeper relationship thing that needs to change. Okay, all of that said, big preamble, but I just wanted to give a little bit of background as to why I was so keen to have this conversation at the moment.
Yeah.
So, handing the mic over to you, Dr. Maz. Tell us a little bit about how this started for you. Was it a conscious decision to do it for a certain amount of time? Had there been a particular issue? Was it just part of a challenge?
Oh, man. Well, like you, I think my what I'd call my sober-curious journey, which, total buzzword right now, #sober-curious. It really began back in 2018, I think. And I'd sort of experimented here and there. Like I'd never really consciously taken a break from drinking because, up until that point, I would probably have described myself as someone who was quite unconscious, still quite self-aware, but very much on autopilot. And so it was when I think it coincided around the time when podcasts started becoming more prominent, or at least in my world and in our little Australian bubble. And, I was getting exposed to all these different ideas, particularly with personal development and growth. And I think just where I was in my life, like it was just after, I finished my PhD in 2017. And that was like on the tail end of my mum's death. And, she, this is no secret. She, was an alcoholic and really didn't take care of herself. So I'd kind of borne witness to the actual physical repercussions of having a lifelong drinking habit. Which, was in the back of my mind. I kept pushing it to the back of my mind because I was like, it's quite horrific, all the follow-on, and she smoked as well. So it wasn't just that. But I was very much, I've always had this relationship with alcohol that has been quite volatile because of how I grew up. So I definitely found myself, in this cycle, particularly after mum died. I basically went into an 18-month binge where I was like, anything and everything that is going to make me feel good and help me to avoid feeling the grief of that, I will take it. And I will, not only will I do it, but being a high achiever type A is like, I'm going to do it so well that no one's going to notice how much I'm doing. And so it became this, like, I found, myself in this cycle, and I was wondering why I was so anxious. I was wondering why my relationships were like, people were just like basically dumping and running from me. And, in my head, I was like, it was everybody else's problem, right? It was everybody else's problem but mine. And so when I started down the personal development rabbit hole, I was like, oh, shit. As Taylor Swift says, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. So I was like, okay, let's just have a little bit of a play. And so I think it was the start of 2019. I was like, I'm going to do 30 days and I'm going to see if I can do 30 days. That's when I think I did Feb fast as well. And so I was like, okay. So I did the 30 days and I was like, similarly like, oh yeah, I feel really good. Like I've got lots of energy. And so I kept going and I got to about 3.5, 4 months back then. And then work, and I started dating someone else and work got really crazy. And so I just kind of, again, just went unconscious and was like, just back in the grind. And then, yeah, similarly with the pandemic, was just like wine subscription. It was a treat to go to the supermarket and pick out some wine. And, and because also it was what everyone was doing, and I think a big part of alcohol is its social lubrication factor, and its ability to connect us, and it's oftentimes one of the only ways that we have to sort of break the ice with people or, invite people in. And so I kind of didn't think about it for ages. And then when I started going to the gym more regularly, similarly again, I sort of noticed that when I did drink, it was really hard to train. And I was like tired and exhausted and I just couldn't push myself. And so last year, the end of last year was a really interesting space and time for me. I'd sort of like got rid of my apartment and went on this big digital nomad adventure, which if people have listened to the episode that we did together back then, that I was just starting that journey. And so I'd sort of spent the end of last year, I was just so burnt out and I was so, exhausted from the pandemic, from my business, from bloody everything. And I kind of crashed and burned a little bit. And so when I got back to Melbourne and started to think about the kind of life that I wanted and the person that I wanted to be, I was like, okay, I need to do some research because, it takes a lot for me to be convinced about something. Like I'm not one of those people that someone can just say, oh, hey, Maz, just don't drink, it's bad for you. And I'll be like, okay. I'm like, no, why? Like, why do you say that? Because my experience differs from that. Like, I'm still alive, I'm functioning, So I was like, hey, how about I do what I did with meat? Because I also gave up meat back in 2016. And what I did back then was that I watched as many health documentaries as I could to get a variety of opinions. And so I could then look for patterns. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do some research and see what I can find. And the research that I found scared the fucking shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe in plain sight all these legitimate studies and, these really well-known, well-accoladed people. And everybody said the exact same thing, that the best amount of alcohol to drink is 0. And I just couldn't, because also, contradictory to that is the government guidelines, which is like, you can have 1 drink a day and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, hang on a minute, like one of these things isn't going together. So what I ended up doing was, and I can talk about what I read and who I kind of looked to as well, but back in February, my gym started another 8-week challenge. And so I said, right, okay, this is going to be the one that this is my leverage point because it's the start of something. I said, I'll do the 8 weeks and then I'll reassess and see how I feel. And I got to the end of the 8 weeks and I actually I didn't even think about it. Like it was like it wasn't until it was about month 4 when I was like, oh, hang on a minute. It's like, wait, how long has it been since I've had a drink? I was like, oh, and because I use the I Am Sober app, which is free to use. And so I checked it and I was like, holy shit, it's been like 4.5 months. And that's when I kind of was like, oh, like this is now who I am. I'm not that version of me anymore. And for me, particularly not drinking was the domino that I needed to knock down a whole bunch of other habits. Like it was the linchpin that once I pulled it out, everything else just fell into place and was so much easier. And I was like, oh, wow. And that's what I think we forget. I think in this hyper productive world, It's always about adding in new behaviors, adding in new habits, taking on new things. But oftentimes what we need to do is actually let things go and do less. And then what we do take on, we can do better.
Yeah. Oh man, I love the way that your brain works, Marion, and that is so good. Okay, I'm going to do all the research and identify the patterns, but I fucking love it because this is the thing that I'm sort of going over and over now is that like the evidence is there and it's irrefutable, but we have been so conditioned for so long. And you touched on something that I think is very interesting there, saying like that's not the version of me that I am anymore, because I think what happens when the messaging through media, movies, peers, parents, whoever, ties it so much to fun, being the fun girl, having a good time, that it really threatens our identity. And I think this is particularly true of creative people as well, because layer on top of that, you've got the trope of like the romantic artist with the bottle of red but like anyone in the world will tell you that alcohol does not make you more creative, you know?
Oh, hell
like,
no. Hell no.
It's not like the very few times in my life that I've been the sober person at a party, it's super fun for like an hour or two. And then you're like, oh, you've suddenly all turned into idiots. Now, 99% of the time, I am one of the idiots.
Yeah.
So
we've
I'm
all
not
been there.
casting any judgment there.
No.
But I think that Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, that I read fairly recently and am now obsessed with him and everything. Oh, fuck. Now what was I about? Oh, yeah. So he says that we will avoid anything that threatens our identity, be it good or bad. And I'm interested to know a bit more about that experience of feeling like you sort of shifted in it. Not that you are still you, right? You've just shifted into being more you, but there's obviously a sense of a new chapter. And was there, particularly at the start, did you find any kind of tension in that, of like, oh, how will people see me? How do I see myself? Because you're an outgoing, out there person who I imagine, similar to myself, probably has always like kept that as part of your thing, that like, yeah, like Maz is fun at a party.
Oh, mate, I am like the perennial party girl. Like I'm always the instigator. I'm always initiating things, and I think it's also one of the things that I loved so much about drinking wasn't so much the getting smashed part, aside from that 18-month grief window, which that was purely reactionary. But outside of that, as someone, as a creative human, as someone who loves to experience new things, the thing that I love most about drinking was learning about how the alcohol was made. It was the story behind the wine, like where did it come from? Why is it important? And there's nothing to say that I can't keep doing that. But now I've just taken that love of that and I've just transferred it across into different parts of my life. So I'm still scratching that itch. So part of it, I mean, yes, it's an identity thing, because what's behind identity is belief, and it's about what do you believe in? And if whatever you believe in will become your identity. So of course, if I believe that the only way that I can connect with people is by being the party girl and, having a drink in my hand and offering a drink and having that being my generosity, my bridge, of course that's going to become my identity. And so I started to think more around like, well, okay, like what do I actually believe in? And like, how is that impacting my quality of life? And so I started to go, okay, well, what other things do I want to learn about? If not that, because I've spent, and this is the part of the thing, I was like, I just turned 38. I've been drinking since I was 16. I was like, I've given enough of my life to that hobby. Like, we're done. We've done that, and as something, I want to keep experiencing new things. And like, that is such a huge cock blocker to so many other new things. Right?
That's so true. This is a thing that I like, the conversation I'll have in my head is like, if there's one thing I can look back, I'm also 38, on my life and say like, I should have partied more. Like, I don't think that's going to be an issue for me. Like, I think I've done, you know what I mean? It's like, I think I've given that one a pretty red hot go. And after a certain time, like, sure, occasionally you'll have one of those nights that is super fun and you stay out late and it's great. Something, you know, all the great people are there. The alchemy is right. But they are, in terms of like nights out drinking, they are like 1 in a million, you know, or
Absolutely.
realistically, probably about 1 in 100, honestly. So like 1%. And you're just sort of like, maybe this time will be that thing that I experience almost none of the time.
And you know what? Oftentimes I was, you know, reflecting on those times as well too. And if I actually dissect, and this is something that we don't do enough, we don't dissect the amazing experiences that we have and look at them and go, what are the ingredients? Like, what actually made that so good? All of those amazing experiences that I've had where alcohol's been involved, it's never been about the alcohol. It's always been about the people and the experience. And so, you know, I think that's part of the issue that we have, particularly, well, the dominant narrative around drinking is like, or quitting rather, is that, you know, you quit because you got a problem, you quit because you're doing too much, you quit because your health's bad. But I think that needs to be completely reframed, so that we don't demonize alcohol, you know, because it's not something, there's nothing, like, it's not good or bad. It's just a substance, you know, it's kind of inert, it's neutral. We're the ones that color it good or bad. And anything that we demonize we're going to eventually probably develop some kind of really bad relationship with. But what if we said that alcohol is just alcohol? And what actually that I'm craving is more connection and, you know, that feeling of being alive, and that the chemical, you know, the chemical release that you get, even though hilariously enough, alcohol is a depressant. So it's like, what's really giving you that feeling? It's probably not the alcohol. But yeah, so I think that there's so much, the cultural narrative around it is so twisted that I'm not surprised that people just don't even want to touch it with an 80-foot pole, because there's just too much. Like, there's just too much to unravel. And a lot of it is like inherited cultural narrative that, you know, we see the way, we saw the way that our parents were with alcohol, so we replicate it because that's what we know and that's what we do. It's what we're really good at. So that's why it can also be really hard for people, is if you're in a group of people where that behavior and that relationship to alcohol is just the norm, having to be the person that has to, you know, separate themselves from the pack, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So that, like, I totally get it. Like, and that was me for decades. Like, I didn't want to, I had enough of my own freaking childhood trauma, abandonment issues, that I didn't need to add on more abandonment to that, you know?
Yeah. And this is the thing, right? Because I'm now looking down the potential of taking some time off, whatever that looks like, a month, 3 months, a year. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But in wanting to be more successful with it, like, and by successful, I don't just mean doing the days I've said I was going to do, like feeling good about it, like getting to a stage where, like, I don't even know how many days it's been. You're not like crossing them off the calendar like, oh, I hate this, I can't wait till I'm free. But there is a great sense of fear and discomfort. And I think that is about the sense of it is missing out, I think. But then thinking like, how can that be sort of reframed? And I think often, you know, you're doing it for a health challenge or whatever the thing is, that we really focus on, as you said, sort of like demonizing it, or not even that, but like focusing on the health benefits. Like, this is like the eating your veggies thing. Like, this is just the thing that you have to do. No one wants to be sober, but you have to do it, or take a break every now and then, because you'll, like, all of the benefits, which we know, sleep better, less anxiety, all the, you know, all the stuff. But it's framed as like a necessary evil, rather than this could actually be the door to more fun, not less fun. But trying to convince yourself of that is quite hard.
It really is. And the other part to this, and I see so many parallels between quitting alcohol and developing and committing to a creative practice. Because you know why? Because people are so afraid to go back to being a beginner. And that's really what you have to do with this, because think about it. Like, part of the reason why, you think you're going to missing out and you're projecting and you're catastrophizing is because this is something you haven't done before. This is a whole new realm, and that is like sitting in the uncertainty of that, much like you sit in the uncertainty of not knowing where a creative project is going. Terrifying. Of course, your brain is going to be spitting up all this talk that's like, you can't do it. Why do you want to do it? Nothing needs fixing, you're doing great just as it is. It's trying to protect you. And unfortunately, it's doing the exact same thing when you try to quit things as well too. Unless, of course, the pain of quitting is greater than the effort that it takes to actually do the thing. When the pain gets to a certain point, you just actually won't want to do it, and that's what you see. That's oftentimes what you see with addicts, is that there is a point that they get to, a tipping point, where they actually, like, whether they have a heart attack, whether they get liver failure or something, or they get severe digestive problems and they can't eat. There is something that pushes them over that edge. Whereas if you are someone who, maybe you're not drinking that much, but you want to take a break, trying to get yourself to that point, that tipping point, is so fucking hard. And it takes so much of your actual body energy to stop and slow down that, like, yeah, of course you're going to keep defaulting back, because if you look at how many years you've been drinking versus the measly month that you're trying to do now, like, of course that greater history is going to win out, And so even when I started, like, yes, I started for 30 days, but like, I woke up every single day and like said the intention that I'm like, I'm just going to try and not to drink today. I'm going to try and not drink every single day until I forgot about it, And it's kind of like, that's like the level of like discipline you almost have to overcome like that huge history that's kind of following you around, particularly if it is something that is like intimately tied to your identity.
Sounds hard. I'm out. No.
Fuck that.
Yeah. It is. It's the other thing. Like, my brain's ability to rationalize things is next level. And I think this is also a curse of being a creative person, because you're so fucking good at coming up with stories. We're great at it.
God.
We get paid for it. And now we're just making them up to do the things that we have decided we don't want to do. And that's the other thing that like makes me want to pull my own hair out, is that I think because I was a very kind of rebellious teenager that was very invested in independence. And then as an adult, because I'm not like an outlaw or a terrible person, I look for things to rebel against to satisfy that adolescent urge. And, the only thing that I have to rebel against is me.
Yes. Oh.
So I will make rules and break them and be like, ha. And then it's like, it's not. No,
this didn't help anybody.
You are the
this
one that's
nothing.
So that's a like interesting cycle to try and have to break, that it's not like I'm not setting rules for myself. This is a thing. This is an experiment. I think that might be a useful framing for me. This is this is an experiment. Let's just do it for a bit and see. And it's not about, I was about to say it's not about discipline, but I mean, it is in one way, but not that thing of like,
it's commitment. It's not discipline. It's commitment. It's
there
like,
you go.
Having the wherewithal and the resolve and the grit to just literally keep showing up. And I'd say it's like, yes, experiment. I think that's a great word to use. Also, I think there's like this, especially if you are a creative person, which, everybody is, but specifically if that's your job, like you can apply those skills to quitting alcohol as well and go, how creative can I get to find the things that I need to replace the drinks that I would normally drink. And that was something that especially in the early days, that's definitely what I leaned into. I was like, right, I'm going to find the best tasting, healthiest options I can, and make sure that no matter where I go, I have something with me that can stand next to a glass of Prosecco, which was like my favorite poison. And so the good part about that too is you get to try new things and, ask people. And this is the other thing too, that I think is a big part of it, especially that social lubricant piece, is announcing it and owning it and saying, hey, I'm taking a break from alcohol from the foreseeable future. But not, you don't have to do the big Instagram reveal, oh, I'm sober now.
Yeah.
But just letting the people that you spend the most time with know that this is something that you really care about. Because I had some real close calls over the last 6 months where I was like, fuck it, I'll just have a drink. And I had a friend step in and be like, no, remember what you said. And I was like, oh, fuck, thank you. Because we can't do it ourselves. Speaking of willpower, we've only got a certain amount of willpower every day. And so, having people who are going to be your champions, and, our mutual friend, Carissa Caramarco, huge, advocate for this and was such a great support to me in the beginning, that, gave me the language and shared resources. And, so I think, there's lots of people that are, behind the scenes, not advertising that they do this, but you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised by when you announce that how many people come out and say, actually, yeah, I want to do it too. Or, hey, I'm, a year into my journey, that, you can talk to and ask for advice rather than, just thinking that this is something you have to do on your own.
Yeah. And this was another question that I wanted to ask you too, was around the reactions from other people. So obviously you've got some amazing supportive friends. I imagine some who are on a similar path, some who aren't. I'm sure both kinds can be equally supportive, but there's always the thing, right? And I am guilty of being on the other side of this too, that we take it as, we know that that's not the person's intention, but we feel it as a personal attack because we know that there's something in us that we're not super comfortable with. But we all, society, we made a fucking deal, bro, that we don't talk about this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you can't, particularly if it's not, we're much more generous, I think, when people are like, you have a very serious problem, that sits in a different camp. But if you're just sort of like, this isn't really serving me, I'm not super cool with this relationship and how it's showing up in my life, we don't like that as much because that's more relatable. And we're like, well, no, I thought we were all in this together. We all kind of think it's fucked, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah. No, and that's, oh gosh, yeah, that it's like a hidden, like a pinky promise swear that we've, been inducted into some kind of secret cult of drinkers. But I mean, I've had every reaction under the sun to this journey, from, incredibly supportive and loving and kind to just plain weird. I remember one of the first times, I think I was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, and I went out for lunch with a friend, and we were always, people would just, whenever we were together, we'd grab a glass of wine and we'd split a bottle. And then she was like, oh, what should we drink? And I was like, well, actually, I'm not drinking at the moment. And she was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And so I ordered a non-alcoholic one, and she ordered a glass of wine, and she's like, here, do you want to smell it? And I was like, what? As if there is this, that that she thinks that I'm missing out, which I thought was a really weird thing. But the other thing too, and I found this really took some of the pressure out, is if somebody was drinking something that I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. Oh, that looks cool. I would have a sip. You don't have to do this as a, 0 to 100 thing. So over the last 6 months, I've probably had 3 or 4 sips of people's drinks just because I wanted to taste it. And I actually found more often than not that was enough. I actually didn't want a full drink, but it's oh, just let me be included in the thing. And I often found for some people, especially if it was a friend that I don't see that often, just that little act of being I'm participating in what you're participating in, it kind of just relaxed them, and then they didn't even say anything about it after, even though I was drinking whatever I was drinking. So it's been It's been really interesting. But more often than not, and this is something that surprised me, thinking about I'm going to miss out, or people are going to give me shit. More often than not, people use me as an excuse not to drink, which I love. So now I'm the gateway. I'm allowed. I'm the one that gives them a break from their drinking and makes them feel better about the fact that the 6 other days of the week they're probably smashing it, but they're like, oh, I'm so healthy because I'm not drinking with Marion, which I find adorable. And I'm happy to be that person. Like, I'm so happy to be that person now, which is hilarious to think about, because like last year it was like the complete opposite story. So it's amazing. It's amazing what can change in such a short amount of time if you just are consistent. Like, it's not about, you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to even do it all the time. But, you just got to find that sweet spot that works for you. And that's something, and it's got to be something that you can maintain, not what anybody else tells you can maintain.
This is it, isn't it? And this is like part of the framing at the start, where I was saying not only are we not honest about kind of the amount that we drink a lot of the time, but I think the most important thing is how we feel about it. So it's not even necessarily about 100% sobriety. It's about whatever that looks like, which I think it often does come down to that, right? But it doesn't have to be. Like, you don't have to set it up as in like, this is the thing or I fail. The goal should be, I feel happy with my relationship to alcohol, which might mean drinking every now and then. I mean, hey, look, if you feel super great about getting smashed every night of the week, have at it. I just don't think that exists.
No. Everyone's got some there's some undercurrent, I think, with everyone's drinking habit. And I would love, like, in an ideal world, I would love and actually I actually think that this is probably where things are going, is that alcohol will go through a moment like cigarettes did. And this is what I was reading about in one of the key resources that definitely got me over the line was Holly Whitaker's book, Quit Like a Woman, where she talks about big alcohol, in the same way that they talked about big tobacco, and sort of how culturally all of that happened and to inform our, behaviors. And so I think alcohol's heading for a moment where, and I mean, it's already getting taxed severely in this country anyway, like all the pre-mixed drinks. And so it will probably end up in a situation where, there's no advertising on alcohol bottles, and they'll be kept, locked behind the little roller doors in the bottle shop. I think that that's where it's going. It's going to take some time for sure, because it's such an old school thing. But prohibition happened before, so could happen again.
That's so interesting. I don't know though, because it's sort of happening. So I agree, and it's really awesome to see there's like so many more options for non-alcoholic beers and wines that are pretty fucking, I mean, I'm not a beer drinker anyway, but some of the non-alcoholic wines are pretty good. Like and it's that thing of like, oh, I feel like I'm having a grown-up drink. It's like, you don't have to be at the party and have a Coke Zero like a nerd. You get to have a wine glass, like have it nice. I noticed going out with Carissa actually recently, she did get a soft drink, but she ordered it in a wine glass just because it's fun. Then you get to, fucking love it.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, so I think, yes, like there is this movement. People seem to be a lot more conscious of it. It's a lot more common to come across people who don't drink. It's less of a big deal. Like in the people I know, have plenty of people who don't drink at all or drink very infrequently. And it's just not, it doesn't affect their ability to participate in social, like it's just not such a thing, albeit it's still very, very ingrained in a lot of us. But then at the same time, we've got this other movement, which I think is very cool, that's around, like craft beers and independent breweries and all of this really exciting, cool stuff that is making, which I don't think like having those at the same time, they could end up being, what's the word with the the plain packaging behind lock and key, right? Because it's exactly the opposite. They're getting like amazing artists to make these things, but it is, so it's not the like anti-alcohol movement, but I do think that having those sorts of drinks, it's moving away from binge drinking culture and into like you were saying, what is the story behind this? You got all these fucking crazy weird flavors. As I said, I've never been a beer drinker, but I love this new form of beer because it tastes nothing like beer, of sours and crazy flavor combinations. Yeah. My brother-in-law owns a beautiful like boutique bottle shop, and just he's so in love with it, you know, like, and he has no drinking problem, but he loves the whole thing and the you know, like trying different beers and going over there is so exciting, but you're not drinking a lot. We might share like, you know, 3 beers between 3 people and you're just having little sips of it. So I think it's maybe not necessarily like alcohol will be out the way of cigarettes, but I think pushing that side of things more could be like that sweet spot in the middle where it's like, let's make this interesting. And if we're saying, oh, it's because I like the taste, I think a lot of the time that's bullshit anyway, which is like, no, I like the fact that it's wet and it gets me pissed. But
snap.
Yeah. But there are things that are genuinely in that camp, you know, really nice, interesting wines, cool, fun beers. But yeah, it's interesting to see those movements kind of happening side by side.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not the first time, and I use cigarettes as an extreme example, but it's definitely not the first time that we've seen those kinds of competing conversations or narratives happening at the same time. Like, just look at health food, for example. Like, look at what's happening with food and food packaging. The junk food and the shit still exists, but now the healthier options and the more intentionally created food products that we have in our supermarkets, you know, there's now probably more of them so that they crowd out the shit. And further to your point, I think that's probably more so. I mean, that's definitely that's happening now. You know, that's happening now, and even the and that in itself is changing the drinking culture. And so now it's like, whereas you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it used to be cool to drink like cask wine. Like, that was like the coolest thing to do. And it did have a bit of a resurgence about like 5 years ago, which cracked me up, because then you had these really ornately designed like wine boxes, which I thought was just the weirdest thing ever. But I think part of it too, like why there's that push for quality is because of that conversation around health. So people are like, I don't want to give up this habit, but like, how do I make it more intentional, more interesting, more quote unquote healthier, by using better ingredients, by, you know, creating like a brand around it and creating an identity around it, you know? But ultimately for me, like, what it came down to was like how alcohol makes me feel, you know? And that's going to be different for everybody. And this was something, and I'll talk about this because I think it's really important, particularly when, you know, you said at the start around being honest with ourselves. So I had to like totally body check myself about my relationship to alcohol, because it wasn't that, you know, I would drink so much that I would pass out and vomit and get sloppy or whatever. But for me, because, you know, there's a long history of alcoholism in my family, very, very intimately tied with, you know, like broken homes, abuse, terrible relationships. And that was all, they weren't sloppy drunks either. They were incredibly high functioning people. And so this is where I had to pull myself up, because when I drink, I do not get sloppy. I do not slur my words. If anything, I get like more energetic, more hyper. I become more aware. And, you know, I found out by listening to the Huberman Lab podcast. Andrew Huberman has a great episode on that show about what alcohol does to your body. And he said that while there's no test for alcoholism, the easiest and most, like one of the most accurate ways to test is like how you get after you have a couple of drinks. If you are someone who, and I'm paraphrasing this terribly, so please go and listen to that episode. He explains why, the science behind why. But if you're someone who, you drink a couple of drinks and you start to yawn, you get sleepy, lethargic, like you'll naturally just stop drinking. But for those of us who are predisposed to alcoholism, the exact opposite happens. We become more energized, more hyper, the more drinks that we have. And so for me, it was really like, that's the fast track for me. Like that's where I've seen where I'm going to end up if I go down that. And I know for me, there is no middle ground with this stuff because I can't stop myself once I start. It's never just one drink. Even when it was one drink, it was never one drink. Yeah. Even when I told myself it was one drink, it was more like 5. Yeah. And so it was kind of one of those moments where I was like, okay, well, I've never experimented with just not having any. So let's see what happens. So yeah, that was really confronting.
Yeah.
Really confronting.
I relate a lot to a lot of this, unfortunately for me.
Uh-oh. God damn it.
God damn it. Ruh-roh. I think that you touched on something important there, though, as well, in that there's something about like it takes away the decision fatigue, right? Because if you're just saying to yourself, I'm not loving the vibe of this relationship with booze at the moment, I'm going to try and cut back a bit. I'll just go out for the one drink. I'll just do the thing. That means every time someone invites you out for a drink or there's a party or there's a thing, you have to decide, am I going to drink tonight? Weigh up the options, or if you do, then you're constantly like on yourself about how much it's so much easier. And in my limited, month on, month off experience with it, I found that it was such a relief to just have that decision outsourced.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, it's easy. I don't have to worry about how much it is or like what is worthy of the night of drinking. Yeah. But then it's also fucking terrifying to be like, well, it's no forever. That feels like a huge decision to make. So
yeah. And I'm not in that camp. Like I didn't go into this saying like I'm never going to drink again because I know the second that sentence like legitimately comes out, like is in my head or comes out of my mouth, the very next thing I'll do is I'm going to get smashed.
Yeah.
But back to your rebellious thing. I'm like, nah, you don't know me. Watch me go. I'll go buy a bottle of Prosecco and just neck it, So
yeah,
it's not been, it's not been about like, this is now who I am. Like, actually it's still not even, it's not an identity for me. I wouldn't consider myself as like a sober person or in, quote unquote, in recovery. That's definitely not the identity that I need to keep this habit going. But for me, it's like I just the pros definitely outweigh the cons, and I'm so curious and excited to see what this iteration of me will accomplish. Because if I look back at my life and see how much fucking shit I've done whilst being a total booze hound, I can only imagine what's going to be possible when I'm not hungover.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is super exciting. And that's it. Yeah. Like, you've not performed the experiment before. And I'm the same, I would have had my first drink when I was about 13, I reckon. First time I went to a pub, I was 14. Shout out to the Tower Hotel Hawthorne. Don't give a fuck. But probably drinking like reasonably consistently since I was about 16, I'd say.
Yeah.
And not ever to a degree of being problematic, with the exception, I would say, like yourself, after my mum died, I reckon that was not great, but also like free pass for that time.
Free pass.
You do what you got to do.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
Yeah, but because it's like it's not been like hugely problematic in any like life-shattering kind of way, we haven't performed that experiment yet. So it's kind of exciting. I'm interested in one of the things that you said in this. So you did this awesome, go and follow Marion on Instagram and go back a few posts, and you did, it was like 60 points, 30 points?
40
points
Yeah.
about things you'd learned in the last 6 months, and which is sparked this whole conversation today. But one of the points on there was that the hardest thing is just not doing it. Could you expand on that a little bit more? Because I'm really interested in that as a framing for it.
Yeah. Oh man. So like it's really easy to just like have a drink. Like that is like the easiest thing to do. And especially as someone who is, I'm very proactive. I am a high achiever, type A. Like I love experiences. I love doing things. The downside to that is that I struggle with all of the things that are not me doing things. So rest. Oh man, I suck at rest. Recovery. I suck at recovery. Letting things go. Suck at that. Letting people down. Suck at that. Really good at letting myself down though. Total pro at that. Usually at the expense of not letting other people down. Hello, shout out to all my fellow people pleasers. So the hardest thing was like just breaking like the Pavlov conditioning that is like when I go to the supermarket, I get a bottle of wine. So like having to like navigate the not doing and be comfortable and okay with like oh I don't do that now. Like I don't do that. And that was like so anxiety inducing for like probably for the first few weeks. Because I was like, well, fuck, what do I do now? But the thing is, I had to decide what to do in place of that. And so that's why that habit change was so hard, because it's like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start meditating or, oh, I'm going to start journaling, where your brain has something to do. But when it's something that you have to not do and actually not do it, it's this whole scramble. It's a whole brain scramble.
You're speaking straight to my
right in the salt in the wound.
Yeah. God damn it. But that's exactly it, isn't it? Because like doing things, I can do that.
Love it.
I can be Miss Productivity, baby. Add more things on my plate. I'll keep them spinning. Love it. Taking things away, which has been a consistent theme of this podcast over the past year or so. Like, how do I edit? How can I simplify things? And I am fucking terrible at it. And this is just another one of the things that sits in that basket, hey?
Yeah.
So did you, and actually this is another thing I wanted to ask you, do you have other vices that leveled up when you took that one away?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. And not the ones, not ones that you would think, right? Like, because it wasn't as if I, stopped drinking and then started shooting heroin. Like, it wasn't that extreme.
That is what I was thinking. Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's where the brain naturally goes. No, it was more. It was like the things that I did in the daytime now became like more obvious. So, like, I just started drinking way too much coffee. Like, oh my God, the amount of coffee that I started drinking. And I'd get to like 2 p.m. and I'd be like a jittery, nervous mess, totally anxious, like, what else do I have to do today? What else do I have to do today? Because like you'd be surprised when you take away something that is essentially a numbing agent that stops you being present. All of a sudden you are confronted with all of this presence and you have this clarity of mind. It's like you can kind of see what you're doing in real time. Whereas I think when you're drinking, at least this has been my experience, you drink to kind of forget. So like what happens now that I can't forget and I'm very conscious and intentional and aware of what I'm doing. But the good thing is like drinking like so many calories, takes up so much time, that then I kind of thought to myself, I was like, I kind of justified it. I was like, I can just drink this much coffee because I'm not drinking that much alcohol. No, actually, it was really bad. And I did burn out a little bit on coffee. So now I have to also, keep that habit a little bit more front of mind and go, okay, like if I have more than 2 coffees, I'm going to see through space and time. And it's and not in like a fun, universal connected way. It's going to be more like a Rick and Morty way. So that one was definitely one that came up. I thought I would probably like eat more, but I think because of the gym work that I'm doing and, I'm someone who has to track their food because my neurospicy brain loves that focus. Whereas if I don't track my food, I will literally eat anything and everything in front of me and in my way, like a Pac-Man. So that's what I mean about the knock-on effect of not doing that meant that I had to sort of step up other things in my life to counterbalance the not doing. So it's like, if I'm not drinking, then I'm going to have to do something else, kind of related to kind of keep things going. But in terms of, I kind of said like, this is a good opportunity to come, to have a new vice. Like, what's going to be my new vice now that I'm not drinking? But honestly, like all I've really wanted to do is like sleep more. I think like sleep is now one of my vices. And then write more, like ferociously writing way more than I have in any other time in my life, which is amazing. A lot, like 95% of it doesn't see the light of day. It's just for me. But my journaling habit definitely like every day without fail, since the start of this experiment has just been like the insights and the intuition. Oh my God, that's the other thing. Alcohol just like pisses all over your intuition and like just completely knocks it out. So now I can actually hear myself, which also is very terrifying. Like, remember this thing that you repressed from like 15 years ago? Ba-bam! So, for me, it's like there's been the vices are different, the vices are different.
Yeah. They sound like pretty good ones, I got to say.
Like how do I cope with all this emotional clarity? That's the question I have to ask myself now. It's like, fuck.
Well, genuinely, I think that is one thing that I and many people are kind of scared of. It's like, I don't particularly following, COVID lockdown years was real fucking hard on a lot of people. And I think that's kind of why it's stuck around so much, is just like, I don't really want to look at that yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't really want to. I mean, I don't even still want to look at things around my mum's death that happened 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And it's, I think as well, the other side of the coin of being a highly kind of productive person who likes getting into stuff and doing stuff is that I have outsourced my switch off time to and it's not just drinking either, but it's actually being hungover. I kind of like, because it's not, and I'm not talking about going out and getting absolutely shit-faced and feeling horrible the next day, but maybe you just, you had a few drinks on a Friday night. You're a little dusty, and I kind of like it because it stops me from like that hyper productivity mode that I have not found the internal resources to be able to do. To be fair, I have not tried very hard to find it.
And you know what? Everything that you're saying right now, you're saying from the perspective of someone who still drinks. The difference is when you stop drinking, you don't think like that anymore because you do not have that chemical fucking with your system. So the emotions are nowhere near as hectic or volatile or loud. They are much more, they ebb and flow a lot more. Like even my reaction to things is totally different. Like, for example, I was just house sitting in Albert Park and my house sitting host came. They're like, we're coming home 2 days early. Me, if I was still drinking, would have panicked and been like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Like, where am I going to stay? What's going to happen? But me now is just like, oh, okay, cool. So I just have to find somewhere to stay for the next couple of days. Easy. So do you know what I mean? Like you looking, those are all valid. Everything that you've just said, completely valid, because that's from that perspective. But what you don't know yet, because you haven't done it yet, is that stuff becomes so much smaller because you have more greater capacity to handle it. And that's something that I wasn't expecting. I was like, oh, I thought I was pretty good at handling myself before. Totally different game now.
Wow.
Totally different game.
Okay, well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
It's all right.
I feel like within this hour or so that we've been talking, that so there's the one conversation that you and I are having, and then there is another conversation that Jessamy and Jessamy are having that has been like, I'm in, I'm out. I'm in, I'm out. I'm out.
Totally. Yeah. And but also I'm also having that conversation in my head, because as we talk about it, I'm just like, oh man, it'd be so nice to just kick back with a beer and, just have an afternoon in a beer garden and do all that. And then the other part of me kicks in and goes, Marion, you can still do that. You don't need. So that second voice is now just, and this is all it needs to be is half a decibel louder than the other one. That's all. It doesn't have to be, it will never be the dominant voice, but it just needs to be loud enough for you to kind of grab the reins and go, oh yeah, okay, that's why I'm doing this.
Did you at the start particularly, did you avoid certain things? So now you're saying of course, you can still go and sit in the beer garden, go to the pub, whatever. But I imagine that gets a lot easier once you're sort of out of the habitual cycle of it. So did you, and I've heard different people have totally different opinions on this. Some people say, no, don't, take yourself out of any of that. You're just going to be miserable. You still need social time. And other people say, no, maybe identify the things that are real triggers and avoid them. So I'm interested in your personal experience of that.
Yeah, I'd probably say a little from column A, a little from column B, because I'm a bit of a sadist that way. So I tend to just I'm pretty good at pushing myself, challenging myself. And so I think really early on, I think it was the second week, I was I'm going to go out for dinner with friends to a restaurant. Let's just see what happens. I'm just going to put myself exposure therapy style and see what happens, But one thing that I did do, and this is a tip from Carissa, is that I did Google the menu before I went there, so that I could see that they had some decent alcohol-free options. And so once nice. I saw that, I was oh, okay, this is going to be easy. I know what I need to order. I don't even need to look at the menu now. I can just be I'll have one of these. So I think, you can there's a middle ground. You can kind of go, okay, I just want to be, because that's it. You just don't want to be caught out. It's the same with any eating. If you're in a situation, and this, this happens to me a lot, especially being someone who doesn't eat meat and tends to eat, prefer healthier. The moments where I don't check the menu and I show up at a place and there's not much for me to eat, I get really anxious. And the same with drinking. If I show up somewhere and all they have is soft drink, I basically throw the equivalent of a 2-year-old tantrum. And I'm I'm not fucking staying here. This is atrocious in this day and age. And I turn into one of those Karen women about the menu options. So, it's more so I'm just doing saving the person who's serving us my tantrum if I just a little bit of research ahead.
That is a really super useful and practical tip. I love it. We're probably kind of coming towards the end of our little chitty chat today.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, firstly, just in wrapping up, thank you so much for having this talk with him. Basically, this is entirely selfish, but I'm sure, and I wanted to we could have gone out for a coffee and had this conversation, but I particularly wanted to have it publicly because I know that there will be so many people who are having the same thoughts, and it doesn't have to be oh no, I'm destroying my life situation to be not feeling super chill about your current relationship with alcohol, and just to let people know that heaps of people have the same thoughts, and it's not, embarrassing. You're not alone. Doesn't mean that alcohol's the devil and everyone should be sober. And that is not, just to be clear, that's not how I'm trying to frame this chat at all. I just wanted to have have this conversation and have it in public so that other people could just kind of hear a bit of the experience, and mainly just to be like, mate, you're not alone. It's been a big fucking couple of years. We've been babies at our bottles, and I think that's okay. But I think I'm currently at the time for myself where it's like, okay, you've given yourself a lot of leeway here, and that's fine. It was a rough couple of years, but let's revisit this now, because it's probably time to put your big girl pants on and do some things for you that are going to sustainably make you happy. So, thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. And you know, I'm by no means a poster child for sobriety yet either, you know. And that's definitely not my intention doing this. But the thing that I have been reflecting on, and this has become a bit of a mantra this year for me, is that it's none of my business what's coming for me. You know, and I think we have this desire to predict, and, you know, again, brain wiring, we want to predict, we want to know, but the things that we know are the things that eventually end up holding us back. So if we can find a way to just find a little bit more comfort in the unknown and the uncertainty of a new path, that's where the real excitement is. That's where oftentimes the joy is, and especially if it's something that's not working for you, you know, that whole Einstein quote of, you know, if you keep, what's the insanity quote about if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, it's like insanity. You know, this is something that actually, like, by doing nothing, by not drinking, that's actually what makes the change, which that's what I think fucks us up the most, because we're used to having to change things, but actually no, you can just like put the glass down and that's it. And that's what I, you know, just focus on that. Just say no, put the glass down, and just see what happens.
I love it. Well, I think that's actually a perfect way to wrap up. Dr. Maz, you are an absolute dream and a ray of sunshine. And for those of you who are watching the video, if you want any evidence of the physical benefits, look how fucking gorgeous this girl looks. She glowing.
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Your skin just goes bloody amazing when you stop drinking. Flawless.
I love it. You are flawless in every way. Thank you so much, gorgeous Dr. Marion Piper. Oh, and you've got a journaling workshop coming up, right?
I do, literally. Friday the 1st of September at 9:30 a.m. AEST, Melbourne time. It's 75 minutes. It's for all levels of journaling. I've got a specific way and methodology that I use, which the whole goal is to start a conversation with yourself. So this could be a great opportunity if you're thinking about taking a break from drinking. You can use that as a way to kickstart another habit like journaling, and use your journal as to document and explore and expand that journey, which that's something that definitely helped me, particularly in the early days, to just keep myself on track. So it's $27.50 for a ticket, nice and low cost. It's online.
Bargain.
You can be in your PJs. You can be in the bathroom. I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. But yeah, Friday the 1st of September. All the details are on my website.
Amazing. I'll pop a link in the show notes. I'm going to come. Because as you know, long-term listeners of this podcast will know, I was going to say a love-hate relationship. It's just a hate-hate relationship. Yeah. And you know what? It goes back to that stupid fucking teenage rebellion thing that's like, oh, you say that it's good for me? You're telling me to eat my veggies? Well, fuck you, me.
Yeah. Well, actually, journaling, they've actually proven that journaling is terrible for you now. Like the latest studies that have come out have said that journaling, awful, it's going to destroy you.
Give it to me. Yes, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to fucking give it a go. And I think that having some, you know, sometimes you just have things framed in the right way or the right structure for you. So I'm excited about it. And I will be in my PJs. So look forward to that.
Right. Amazing. So will I probably, to be honest.
Love it. All right, Dr. Maz, you're the best. Love you so much. Thanks so much for coming on.
Love you too. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. Please follow us wherever you find your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra kind, rate and review. Or if you got any insights or value from this, share with a friend.
You can also find us on Instagram at ImposterPod or online at impostersyndromeclub.com.